Good morning. I'm Emily Welch, and I'm pleased to serve on the awesome RE and standing committees. Welcome to First Church Unitarian in Littleton, Mass. We're so happy that you have joined us here at church this morning. An extra special welcome to any newcomers. We're glad that you have found us online and are with us today. Be sure to check out Community Matters for important announcements, including about how you can volunteer for the reopening task force, how you can contribute musical offerings to our Sunday services. Plus, there are a few upcoming events, gatherings, COPE and RE, to name a few. Please join me now in the spirit of worship. Welcome to church.
Good morning. My name is Molly Lozeau, and I am the music director here at FCU. The prelude that you're going to hear today is actually called Prelude, and it's in the key of B minor, and it's by Frédéric Chopin, a French composer who wrote lots and lots of beautiful piano music. So this was an intention to begin the service in a reflective, relaxed way.
The butterfly counts not months, but moments, and has time enough. Time is a wealth of change, but the clock in its parody makes it mere change and no wealth. Let your life lightly dance on the edges of time, like dew on the tip of a leaf. The words of Rabindranath Tagore. Let us worship. Now, Madelyn, Riley, and Eliza Hammer will lead us in the lighting of our chalice and the saying of words of our covenant.
Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
You can go down now, Zebra.
Thank you so much, Madelyn and Riley and Eliza. So good morning and welcome to the virtual worship service of First Church Unitarian here in Littleton, Massachusetts. My name is Lara Hoke, and I'm so happy to be the minister serving this wonderful congregation. And I join Emily and Molly in saying that we're really glad you found us this morning. This Sunday is the final Sunday of the Soul Matters theme of imagination, which I have enjoyed. I hope you have too. And today I invite you to join with me in imagining time. So you might notice I'm wearing my rainbow stole. This is in honor of the Saturday Night Live skit last night, which featured a very silly skit with at least on the game show that she was playing in the skit, closeted lesbian Unitarian minister. So there you go. Isn't it nice that in 2021, we can be a lot more out safely in UU congregations than we could in 1991 when the skit was set. So with that, let's get moving. We have a lot of great stuff this morning, and I want to invite Molly to introduce the opening hymn.
Hi, our opening hymn today is number 8, Mother Spirit, Father Spirit, and you are lucky to be able to sing with yourselves. We'll have a recording of the congregation. You can read from your hymnals, or the words will be on your screen.
I usually step away from the microphone for the hymns. I apologize that there was too much of my voice in that. In any case, it's the time for all ages. So if there are children in your home, get them here, and Anna Fadden will tell our story this week.
Our story this morning is The Everything Seed by Carole Martignacco, illustrated by Joy Troyer. Carole Martignacco is a poet, singer, grandmother, and former RE director. She's a Unitarian Universalist minister serving a congregation in Quebec's eastern townships and as president of the Unitarian Universalist Ministers of Canada. Here is the story. Have you ever watched a seed grow? Have you ever noticed how it begins so small, so still, so quiet, like a gift wanting to be opened, and how slowly it wakes up, begins to unfold, growing into something larger and larger and larger. Then you know that whatever comes from a seed usually ends up looking very little like the seed it came from, which is also true of the very first seed. Once, long, long ago, way back before the beginning, so long ago there was no such thing as time because there was no one there to count it. Everywhere was a huge, deep, mysterious place, like something waiting to happen. There were no stars, no sun or moon. There was no place like Earth, not a drop of water or a single tree or a rock or flower, and no living beings anywhere. But in that deep waiting space was hidden the tiniest point of something no bigger than a seed. It was not a flower seed. It was not an elm tree seed. It was not a seed of corn, although all those things were included in the seed. You might call it an everything seed, because that is what it became. No one knows where that first seed came from, or how it was planted, or how it knew, in the way that only seeds seem to know, how long to wait for just the right moment to sprout and grow. But all at once, this tiny seed, cradled and nourished in the rich soil of space, woke up, broke open, and began to unfold. Unfolding, unfolding, and blossoming forth into an enormous blaze of bright light, like a great-grandmother's sun, and the universe was born. Out fluttered the galaxies like storms of snowflakes, swirling and gathering into the brightest, most blindingly beautiful clouds of stars. And out of those star clouds whirled our own star, the one we call the sun, and our Earth, and our moon, and all the round spinning galaxies and planets that we have learned how to name. And this is the secret of that tiny seed. You and I were there in the very beginning, just as the idea for each leaf on a big oak tree lies hidden inside an acorn. We were there with all the stars and planets, all the rocks and oceans, plants and animals and people. Everything that is now, ever was, or ever will be, was inside that first tiny seed. So whenever you hold a seed in your hand and wonder what it could become, imagine how you and all that is here once came from that tiniest speck of an everything seed, before it sprouted and grew long, long ago in the way back beginning of time. Now, if this was an ordinary story, it would end right here. But this story of the universe keeps unfolding. What once began in a blazing blossom of light continues every day. New stars sprout open in the deep soil of space. New plants and animals appear on the earth. Seeds of many kinds are scattered everywhere to help us remember. And new people are born every day with the spark of that first light still alive and burning deep inside, waiting, like the everything seed, to shine in ways that are yet to be known.
Thank you so much, Anna. And just a reminder, if anyone would be willing or interested in reading one of our stories, please let me know. It's great to see different readers sharing in that time. This is the time for our offering. First Church Unitarian in Littleton is a self-sustaining congregation, and we rely on the generosity of our members and friends, sharing time and talent, and when they are able, treasure too. If you'd like to send in an offering this morning or to make part of a pledge payment, you can do that using this address, 19 Foster Street in Littleton, attention Assistant Treasurer, zip code 01460, or go to the website fculittle.org, look for the yellow donate button, and it will explain everything to you about donating online. I'm going to introduce now, it's my pleasure to introduce now, the special offertory this morning. So you might want to make that donation maybe after the service, because you don't want to miss this actually. It's a video made with images from the FCU Arts Playshop, which was a series of art courses. You'll see some text explaining it, run by our own Niela Miller, a woman of many talents. And you'll see some of the art that members of this congregation and friends of this congregation created. And the music that it's set to is also written by Niela. A couple of wonderful pieces that were played live at the concert here just a little more than a year ago. The first piece played by our music director, Molly. The second piece played by Justin McCarthy, a former music director here. So please enjoy. Thank you, Niela, and to the Arts Playshop artists. I'm so glad we got that in before the January Soul Matters Month of Imagination ended. What wonderful imaginative images and art you created. Thank you for sharing. This morning's reading is a poem written by Emily R. Ferrara, author of The Alchemy of Grief and a many times published poet and my wife. And the poem is called Omphalos. Everything has genes of love inside. Hafiz. Consider the laws of thermodynamics. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, and hot mass will cool over time. Lust wanes, but our bond is beyond time, no longer reversible. Watch a pot of water boil, time expand. Run your fingers from sandstone to the Vishnu Schist. Touch a billion years of missing time. Remember, neither energy nor mass will ever go missing, as I have gone missing. There ends the poem. I wonder how many of you, before you heard the title of today's sermon, had ever heard of the Vishnu Schist. I hadn't heard of the Vishnu Schist myself until I heard it in the poem that I just shared. It just grabbed me. Vishnu Schist, what's that? The word schist sounded wonderfully and comically Germanic, and Vishnu is a Hindu avatar of God. Actually, Vishnu is part of the Hindu trinity, if you will, of Brahma, the creator, and Shiva, the destroyer, and Vishnu, who is the preserver or sustainer. In any case, I had never heard of that term, Vishnu Schist, before reading that poem. It turns out that it's a geological term. Specifically, the Vishnu Schist is a geological feature found at the Grand Canyon. Schist is a geological term for a particular type of metamorphic rock. Schist is from the same root as the word schism, swap the M for a T. The Vishnu Schist are the basement rocks of the Grand Canyon. They are that lowest layer, and they date back to Precambrian times. Once upon a time, eons ago, there was a mountain range, which has posthumously been named the Vishnu Mountain Range. And over time, that entire mountain range was eroded away. The Vishnu Schist is the metamorphic rocks that is left behind from the ancient Vishnu mountains. I'm guessing that the same folks among you who had heard of the Vishnu Schist are also familiar with the term, the geological term, the Great Unconformity. The term unconformity in geology refers to gaps in geological strata or layers. Unconformities represent huge geological time periods, long enough periods, say, for an entire mountain range to be created and eventually eroded away. The Great Unconformity of the Grand Canyon is actually part of an unconformity that goes all the way across the ancient core of this continent. This ancient version of North America was submerged under a sea, presumably eroding the Vishnu Mountains over time. And then over great periods of time, new layers were deposited on top of these Vishnu rock remains. And at the spot in the Grand Canyon where the Vishnu Schist meets the Tapete sandstone, right at that spot, there is a gap of approximately 1.2 to 1.6 billion years of time. 1.2 to 1.6 billion. That's about 1/3 of the Earth's entire 4.5 billion year history. Missing from the record where you see that line of the great unconformity above the Vishnu Schist. 1.5 billion years mysteriously absent. Where did it go? To think of geological features and time scales makes me think of lots of things that it is disconcerting to ponder, like just how short a human life is compared to the Earth's timeline, like just how recently Homo sapiens and eventually human civilization came into being, like just how short the human experiment might be if we don't change our ways. 1.5 billion years of geological history is missing at the Great Unconformity. The first human civilization known was in Lower Mesopotamia, dating back a mere 5,500 years ago. Is there any chance that human civilization will last 1.5 billion years? Could human civilization outlast a mountain range? Not including the mountains that we impact through fracking and mountaintop removal coal mining, of course. When human civilization has been around for a mere 5,500 years, and a long human lifespan is about 100 years, how can we possibly wrap our minds around 1 million years, never mind 1.5 billion? According to those who believe literally in the timeline found in the Hebrew scriptures, sometimes the fundamentalist Christians or fundamentalist Jews for that matter, the earth is somewhere between 6,000 and 10,000 years old. Hinduism has a very different idea of the earth's age. One thing I've always appreciated about Hinduism is the amazing intuition that it has about cosmology. The ancient Hindus didn't intuit that the earth was 6,000 to 10,000 years old. They knew somehow that the earth and the universe have been around longer than we can imagine. In Hinduism, there's a belief in the never-ending cycle of ages as the universe is destroyed, recreated, develops, and is destroyed and recreated again. The great epics of Hinduism are called yugas. Right now, we are said to be in the Kali Yuga, an age of darkness, the fourth of the 4 stages in the never-ending cycle. The yugas of Hinduism are more like epics of science that tell us to think in terms of millions of years, not thousands of years. But to borrow from the band Chicago, does anybody really know what time it is? What is time? It's a fascinating question, really, and a hard one to answer. In his 4th century work, Confessions, the Christian philosopher St. Augustine of Hippo wrote, "I know what time is, as long as no one asks me to explain it." We have our common sense understandings of time. Of course we know what time is, but when we really try to pin it down as a concept, it's pretty elusive. Even the smartest scientists around don't completely agree. Some believe in something like Newtonian time, where there's a kind of cosmic clock. There's an absolute thing called time that starts with the Big Bang, and it's the same everywhere for everyone. And in this view, time is like a river. The moments just flow from one to the other. And so the present is the only time that really exists. The past is done and gone, and the future isn't here yet. And this matches our daily intuition about time pretty well. But most modern physicists now reject this idea about time, which is sometimes called the A theory of time. Another common theory is called sometimes the B theory of time. In this view, you don't have the Newtonian cosmic clock. Instead, you have Einstein's idea of relative time that can be stretched, a kind of time that has a built-in relativity, where time is in the eye of the beholder, as physicist Brian Greene puts it. In this view, the past, the present, and the future are all real. They all exist, and in fact, they all coexist. That is, the past, the present, and the future are all in existence right now. The big problem with this theory is that it doesn't match our common sense worldview at all. But it does match Einstein's relativity and many other things about modern cosmology quite nicely. The fact that we can't wrap our minds around something intuitively is not necessarily a problem for science. Einstein himself said that the distinction between past, present, and future is merely an illusion, however, a very persistent one. Einstein knew that this way of thinking about time is not at all intuitive. But that doesn't mean it's not true. I have had a few experiences, actually, that make this B theory of time seem more intuitive than you might think. And these are mystical experiences, actually. Now, I have not had many mystical experiences in my lifetime, so this stands out for me. The 4 hallmarks of a mystical experience, according to the Varieties of Religious Experience by William James, are that it is transient, that is, it doesn't last long. A mystical experience has a noetic quality, meaning it feels like a revelation of knowledge, and it tends to feel authoritative to the one who experiences it. Mystical experiences are passive. That is, the one experiencing it doesn't feel in control once it happens. And finally, they are ineffable, meaning they're hard to describe, they're hard to put into words. But I'm going to try. In essence, my mystical experience is this. There's a spot on the grounds of my old elementary school, Schaefer Elementary School in Camp Hill, Pennsylvania, which has since been demolished, but it doesn't matter. There's a spot there on those grounds that I experience mystically as a kind of time portal. Schaefer Elementary School had a little rolling hill from the building up to the playground. And once you were on the playground, you could go around the corner of the building, back down the little hill in a hidden corner right next to the multipurpose room windows of the building. The recess monitor could never detect you down there in that little spot. Nice little spot. Now, usually during recess, I was in peppermint patty mode, and I was up on the playground playing a rousing game of kickball or dodgeball or something. But every once in a while, I'd have a more introspective Linus moment, and I would go down to that quiet, hidden little spot away from it all. Now, mind you, I never had a mystical experience there as a kid. But in my adult life, it first happened like this. I was participating in a guided meditation, and I was told to think of a peaceful, safe-feeling space, and imagine that. And so I imagined this very quiet spot on the old school grounds. And as instructed, I just meditated on it a while. But then I felt myself slipping away into that spot, being pulled back in time to about 1976 on this hidden little bit of playground. And I felt dizzy, and my stomach was flipping. And it was indescribably real. And then I got kind of scared and shook myself out of this mystical experience. And since that time, I have sometimes done this on my own, focused on this little spot and felt myself sort of slipping back into that space-time for a while and then pulling myself back. I have since discovered that I can do something similar if I focus on a very specific, very vivid memory from childhood or adolescence. Now, Do I think this is real? A real experience of mystical space-time travel? Well, it's as easy for me to explain this away psychologically as it is for you, I'm sure. But I can tell you, it feels so incredibly real that when I ponder the B theory of time, it almost becomes an intuitive way to grasp the possibility that the past, or at least my past, is just as real and is coexisting with the present, or at least my present. Of course, the disturbing part of the B theory of time is that the past, present, and future are all real and coexisting, and it leads then to the idea of determinism. That is, can we act in any way right now in the present that will impact the future? Or is everything already predestined, already written in the stars, so to speak? If my future is some other being's now, as Einstein's relativity and the B theory of time seem to suggest, how can I do anything in the present that will impact that future? When you picture time as a river flowing moment to moment, or the A theory of time, then you intuitively imagine that one moment impacts the next moment. So then your present does impact the future. The past determines the present the future. And at first this seems reasonably appealing, but as physicist Neil deGrasse Tyson says, time makes us all a prisoner of the present, forever transitioning from our known past into an unknown future. Tyson thinks the A theory of intuition about time is actually as disturbing in its own way as the B theory. So for instance, he says that you can move around in the other three dimensions of space. You can move forward and backward and up and down and left and right, side to side, but somehow you're stuck in the dimension of time. But maybe, as the Queen says in Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass, it's a poor sort of memory that only works backwards. Alan Watts, a 20th century philosopher, a former Episcopal priest who became an interpreter of Eastern religions for the West, said that we regard ourselves as puppets of the past, driven along by the past. Watts says that our idea of causality is that life moves forward under the power of the past. But he questions this idea that present events have been caused by past events. For instance, he notes that we say that World War I began in 1914 and ended in 1918. But the lead up to World War I began long before 1914, and the repercussions of that war lasted long after 1918. It's a puzzle, in a way, how one event leads to another or relates to another. Watts says that in reality, there are no separate events, and that every single thing in our world can be called an event. He notes that all material things are actually vibrations, waves, when you get right down to the atomic and subatomic level. Sounds are vibrations. The world is a vibration, he says. By the same token, material things, sounds, and the world itself are all events. As Watts puts it, all events are really one event. We're really looking at different parts of one continuous happening. But it doesn't matter for Watts, because as he says, the fact is it all starts now, right now. Explaining things by the past is really a refusal to explain things at all. What does explain things is the present, he says. In fact, Watts wants to say that the past is the result of the present and not the other way around. He says there's a path to freedom from feeling that you're a puppet of the past. It's a change of thinking. Think of yourself in terms of what you're doing now, he says. You're the dog, not the tail. This might seem like philosophical nonsense, but modern experiments in neuroscience show that very near future experiences, very near future influences your perception of the present. For instance, neuroscientist David Eagleman describes an experiment where subjects were asked to describe what they see in the moment of a flash. And it turns out that our brains interpolate. After the flash event, our brain continues to gather information and retroactively says what it thinks it saw. There's a very brief lag, but a very real lag. For the subjects, about 80 milliseconds into the future gets wrapped up into the perception of the present. There are always gaps, unconformities, if you will, in our perceptions. You blink, and the world goes dark for 80 milliseconds. In fact, as Eagleman explains, every time you move your eyes, your visual system actually shuts down for milliseconds, and your brain stitches it all back together for you. Physicist Brian Greene tells us to think about it this way. You can visualize or conceptualize that space is all out there, even though you can't personally see it all. Well, he says, time is also like that. It's also all out there, he says. Time isn't a flowing river. Greene says it's more like a frozen river, with every moment locked in space-time. The universe, he says, is really a vast collection of nows from multiple perspectives. There is an unconformity in our perception of time. We seem to have gaps in our perceptions of past and future, but it's all now. To paraphrase Psalm 118, this is the now that your perception has made. Rejoice and be glad in it. But in addition to rejoicing in the now, there's another takeaway for me. We often do things to produce a certain outcome. When we think of the old-fashioned way where time is a river, we do something in the present to bring about a desired outcome for the future. So when I'm thinking of something bigger than myself, and I do something now, like say protesting a pipeline being built in a city, so that the future might be better. But maybe Tyson and Watts and others are right, and I shouldn't be so focused on causality, which might operate in a way that we can't fathom. Maybe instead I should focus on doing things not because of the hoped for outcome, but because I think I can make, not because I think I can make the right side win, but simply because they're the right things to do. After all, I don't know if my actions can stop the pipeline. I don't know if the legislation I'm advocating for will pass. I don't know if the new citizen that I'm helping to register to vote will vote for the candidate that I hope they will vote for. But I feel that these are still the right things to do, win or lose, come what may. And maybe that is part of the secret to a life well lived, to live in the now as we perceive it, doing things that we believe are right, regardless of outcome. The late Ram Dass said, "Be here now," in 1971. 40 years later, in 2011, he updated it to "Be love now." To quote Maya Angelou, "I'm convinced of this: good done anywhere is good done everywhere." As long as you're breathing, it's never too late to do some good. Perhaps good done any time is good done every time. Imagine with me making the most of the gift of time and of space-time, and be love here and now. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.
No, I am. Welcome you to listen and reflect on our closing song today. It is the song Imagine by John Lennon and is performed by Patty Sardella and Laura Paler.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. It is hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for. And no religion too. Imagine all the people living like it please you. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will be as one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger, and love throughout the land. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one.
Friends, I invite you, if there's somebody in your space-time with whom you can safely hold hands, I invite you to do that now. Otherwise, if you are in your own unique space-time, well, I suppose we all are. But if you are in your own space alone, as I am here in the sanctuary, I invite you to put your hands together and feel that warmth for our closing words. Imagine the preciousness of this bit of time that we have on earth, the miracle of our existence, the miracle of all existence. I am thankful and in awe that I can share this bit of cyberspace time with you each week. And I know that the good we do in our bit of space-time is good in every bit of space-time. Let us be part of the good happening of the universe. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.
And our postlude today is called Arabesque. It is by Friedrich Brügmüller, who was a German composer writing in the early classical period, the early 1800s. And he did a lot of good in the piano community by writing pieces that were challenging for beginning students and taught technique and musicality and better ways of playing the piano. He wrote hundreds of pieces for the purpose of helping younger students and early beginners play more musically. So here is Arabesque.